It was an ordinary Tuesday morning, or at least it seemed that way. The sun was rising over the bustling skyline of Los Angeles, casting golden rays across the city, unaware that an extraordinary moment was about to unfold. Inside a private terminal at LAX, a single figure stood out, his eyes scanning the monitors as he checked his phone with the kind of intensity that only Elon Musk could bring. Elon Musk, the tech mogul, the man who revolutionized the electric car industry, conquered space, and built a multi-billion-dollar empire, was about to encounter something that would shake the foundation of his world. And it wasn't an impending rocket launch or a world-changing project, it was something far more trivial. He had just been told to wait outside. The words hit him like a slap across the face, the sting echoing in the sterile, air-conditioned space of the private terminal. Musk raised an eyebrow, his brow furrowing as he glanced up. The airline staff member, a young woman with the standard, immaculate uniform, was standing at the counter, her expression more businesslike than apologetic. She repeated herself, as though the words needed to be etched into his mind. "Mr. Musk, I'm afraid there's a delay. You'll need to step outside and wait for further instructions," she said, her tone flat, almost robotic. For a moment, Elon's mind processed the absurdity of the situation. Did she just tell me to wait outside? He thought. Of all the people in the world, of all the individuals who could walk through the terminal doors, he, the man who had made billions by disrupting the status quo, was now being treated like some random passenger waiting for a flight. This wasn't just any flight either. This was his private jet, one of his many toys, ready to whisk him away to yet another series of meetings. Yet here he was, being dismissed like an inconvenience. His initial instinct was to laugh. A nervous chuckle escaped his lips, but the silence around him made it feel like a sound too large for the space. It wasn't funny. Not at all. "Excuse me," Musk began, his voice controlled but tinged with disbelief, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I don't wait outside." The young woman stared at him with the same blank expression. "I'm sorry, Mr. Musk. We're just following protocol. Please step outside, and we'll call you when we're ready for you to board." The absurdity of it all was overwhelming. Here he was, the CEO of multiple world-changing companies, a man with a reputation that stretched from Silicon Valley to the stars, and yet in this moment, he was just another person being told to wait like a regular customer. For a split second, a surge of anger bubbled up from deep within him. It wasn't just about the flight. It was about the principle. It was about the disrespect. In that moment, he realized just how much of his life was spent dealing with this kind of petty bureaucracy, these small, insignificant moments that chipped away at his sense of control. He glanced over at his assistant, who stood nearby, looking equally stunned. The assistant, a tall, thin man named Ryan, was practically shaking his head, trying to signal to Elon that it was probably best to just comply and move on. But this wasn't just another delay. This wasn't just another inconvenience. This was a moment that could change everything. What would happen if I just stopped? Elon didn't like to be disrespected. It had happened before, countless times, from engineers who didn't take him seriously to investors who tried to pull the plug on SpaceX. Each time, he had turned those moments of frustration into fuel for bigger ideas, for innovation, for progress. But this? This was something different. "Wait outside," Musk muttered under his breath, still incredulous. He wasn't sure whether to be offended or just laugh at the sheer ridiculousness of it all. But something in that moment triggered something deep within him. The powerlessness he felt here, in this airport lounge, was the same feeling he had experienced during the darkest moments of his life, moments when he almost gave up on Tesla, moments when SpaceX had seemed like an impossible dream. But he had never given up. He had never let anything or anyone stand in the way of his vision, and he wasn't about to let a flight attendant tell him to wait outside just because they couldn't follow through on their responsibilities. Musk's gaze darkened as he made a snap decision. The idea was impulsive, irrational even, but that was how he worked best. His mind raced through the possibilities, each one more dramatic than the last. Could he really follow through on this? Could he send a message, not just to this airline, but to the entire world? Could he really make them understand that nobody, no company, no individual, should ever have the power to undermine him? He straightened his back and turned to Ryan, his eyes sharp with focus. "Call the others. We're shutting them down." Ryan blinked in surprise, clearly unsure of whether Elon was joking. "Shutting them down? The airline?" "No, not the airline." "Everything," Elon said, his voice now calm but commanding. "We're going to send a message." Ryan took a deep breath. He had worked with Elon for years and had seen his temper flare up before, but this felt different. This wasn't a typical outburst. Musk was a man of action, and when he said something, he meant it. Without another word, Elon grabbed his phone and began typing rapidly. He started sending emails to key figures in his companies. A few minutes later, Ryan's phone buzzed as well. Calls and messages from investors, engineers, and key executives flooded in. The plan had been set in motion. Within moments, Musk was no longer just a frustrated billionaire, he was a man on a mission. His anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it had become something else, something far more powerful. This moment wasn't just about a single encounter with a disgruntled airline employee, this was about taking control, about shaking the very foundation of his empire and reasserting his power. He wasn't going to sit around and let anyone make him feel small. Not now, not ever. The tension in the air was palpable as Musk's assistant scrambled to make calls, trying to handle the fallout from Musk's sudden decision. But it was too late to turn back now. The world was about to watch. As Elon Musk stood at the edge of the private terminal, ready to step outside as ordered, he couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline. This was a moment of reckoning. And what would come next? Only time would tell. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? To understand what led Elon Musk to such an extreme decision, you need to first understand the man himself, the forces that shaped him, the battles he fought, and the relentless drive that fueled his rise to power. This wasn't the first time Musk had faced an obstacle that seemed insurmountable, nor would it be the last. The twists and turns of his life had prepared him for moments like this, moments when everything hung in the balance, and only his instincts could guide him through. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, on June 28, 1971, Elon was a curious child with a mind that worked differently than most. He was always asking questions, diving deep into subjects that fascinated him, space, technology, and the way things worked. But while his peers were outside playing sports or socializing, Elon found solace in books. He devoured them, particularly science fiction and fantasy, and his favorite was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That book, in particular, sparked a fire in him. It wasn't just the thrill of space travel that drew him in, it was the possibility of what humanity could achieve if they dared to dream big. His childhood, however, wasn't all smooth sailing. His parents' divorce when he was young left him with a complicated relationship with his father, Elon Musk. His father was a brilliant but difficult man, often distant and critical. Elon's relationship with him was fraught with tension, and he would later describe his childhood as lonely and difficult. But it was also during this time that Elon began to develop the kind of resilience that would shape his future. As a teenager, Elon was bullied at school. He was small, awkward, and an easy target for other kids. But even then, Elon's mind was on something bigger than high school drama. He immersed himself in learning about computers and technology, teaching himself how to program at the age of 12. He even sold a basic game he created called Blaster for $500, a small but significant step toward realizing his ambition to change the world. By the time he moved to Canada at the age of 17, Elon had already made up his mind that he would do something extraordinary with his life. He attended Queen's University in Ontario for 2 years before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned degrees in both economics and physics. It was during these years that his vision for the future began to take shape. Musk wasn't content with simply building a career in one industry, he was driven by a deep desire to solve the world's most pressing problems. He was obsessed with the idea of making humanity a multiplanetary species and transforming the way we lived on Earth. These were lofty ambitions, ones that many people would have dismissed as pure fantasy. But not Elon. He believed it was possible. He wasn't just thinking about the next big product, he was thinking about the next big leap for mankind. After college, Elon moved to Silicon Valley, where he entered the world of tech startups. His first major success came when he co-founded Zip2, a software company that provided business directories and maps for newspapers. The company was sold to Compaq for $307 million in 1999, and Musk walked away with $22 million. But instead of resting on his laurels, Musk had already set his sights on something much bigger, something that would change the world forever. In 1999, Elon founded X.com, an online payment company that would eventually become PayPal. Musk's vision was to create a global financial network that would make it easier to send money anywhere in the world. But as with many of Musk's ventures, things didn't go smoothly. He was ousted as CEO of X.com in a power struggle, but instead of folding under the pressure, Musk took the $180 million he received from PayPal's sale to eBay and invested it into his next big idea, SpaceX. Musk's dream of space exploration was more than just a desire to build a rocket, it was a quest to save humanity from itself. He believed that our reliance on Earth was dangerous, and the future of the human race depended on making life multiplanetary. Despite the skepticism of the space industry and the countless failures SpaceX endured in its early days, Musk pushed forward. With each failure, he learned more, and with each success, he grew bolder. In 2008, SpaceX became the first privately funded company to send a rocket to orbit. That was just the beginning. At the same time, Musk was also focusing on another revolutionary project, Tesla. His vision was simple but ambitious, to build a mass-market electric car that could compete with gasoline-powered vehicles. Tesla faced immense challenges, from technical difficulties to financial struggles. But Musk's persistence paid off, and in 2012, Tesla's Model S hit the market, redefining the electric car industry. Musk was no longer just a tech entrepreneur, he was now a household name, a symbol of innovation and risk-taking. Yet, for all his successes, Musk had always struggled with the feeling that he was alone in his mission. Yes, he had supporters, investors, and an army of engineers who shared his vision. But at his core, Musk was a man who often found himself isolated by the very ambition that fueled him. The world seemed to be divided between those who believed in his grand ideas and those who doubted him, even mocked him. This constant push-pull dynamic kept him on edge, never fully comfortable in his own skin. The moment at the airport, a trivial incident to anyone else, was a catalyst, a tipping point. Musk had spent his entire life proving people wrong. He had been told that electric cars were impossible, that space exploration was a fantasy, and that his ideas would never work. And time again, he had defied the odds. But the moment at the terminal made him feel something he had rarely felt, insignificant. He had everything, yet in that moment, an airline employee made him feel small, dismissed, and powerless. The frustration that boiled up inside him wasn't just about the inconvenience, it was about everything he had fought for, everything he had sacrificed. It was about the millions of hours spent building companies that had redefined entire industries, only to be reduced to a passenger with no control over his own destiny. But here's the thing about Elon Musk, he doesn't accept defeat. If anything, these moments of frustration only drive him further. He doesn't run from challenges, he embraces them. And right now, he was ready to turn this small insult into something much bigger. The moment Elon Musk walked out of the private terminal, it wasn't just the warm California sun hitting his face. There was something far more intense in the air, a sense of urgency, as if every step he took was a part of something bigger, something that could alter the trajectory of his future and perhaps the world's. As the doors of the terminal closed behind him with a faint whoosh, a deep-seated feeling of injustice gnawed at his gut. For a man who had defied the odds time and time again, this particular incident shouldn't have fazed him. But the more Elon thought about it, the angrier he became. The more he replayed the interaction in his mind, the more ridiculous it seemed. Wait outside. He couldn't shake the words. It wasn't about the inconvenience of waiting for a flight. It was about being diminished. It was about being treated like just another person, another passenger in a sea of nameless faces. But Musk wasn't one to back down from an insult, especially not when it came to his autonomy, his authority, and his power. He had spent his entire career fighting to carve out a space in the world, to create a legacy. And now, in a small airport terminal, he was being dismissed as irrelevant. That was something he couldn't, and wouldn't, let slide. He turned to Ryan, his assistant, who was still standing near the entrance, his face a mixture of confusion and caution. "Get the team on the phone," Elon said, his tone calm but sharp. "This is going to escalate." Ryan nodded, quickly dialing the number on his phone as Musk stood there, feeling the heat of the moment. He had a decision to make, and this wasn't just about him. This wasn't just about a private jet and an airline staff member. This was about sending a message. For years, Elon had been the face of disruption, the man who broke barriers, the man who turned impossible ideas into tangible realities. But every great revolution needed a spark. This moment, this tiny, absurd incident, could be the catalyst for something far more significant. The idea of shutting down an entire company, the airline, the entire operation, was wild, impulsive, and, on the surface, irrational. But for someone like Musk, who thrived on the edge of chaos and ambition, it felt just right. The more he thought about it, the more logical it became. This wasn't just a personal vendetta. This was about teaching the world a lesson in power and control. It wasn't just about the respect he deserved, it was about making sure that no one ever treated him, or anyone else for that matter, like they were insignificant. Ryan stepped closer, his voice low but urgent. "Elon, are you sure about this? Shutting them down? It's a huge move. It could create a mess, legally, financially, reputation-wise. You have investors, partners." "I know what I'm doing," Musk interrupted. "This isn't just about this one airline. This is about a system that treats people like cogs in a machine, where authority is used to crush those who don't fit the mold. I'm not going to let them make me feel small. Not today." Ryan hesitated, the gravity of the situation settling in. "Okay. I'll make the calls, but you know this is going to get ugly." Elon nodded, his mind already racing ahead, formulating a plan. He wasn't sure exactly what the end result would be, but that was never the point. For Musk, the thrill had always been in the journey, the twists, the turns, the unexpected moves that created chaos and then shaped it into something revolutionary. The world would watch. He would make sure of it. Ryan stepped back, making the necessary calls, trying to reach key figures in Musk's various companies. The connections Musk had built over the years were vast, and Ryan knew that once the gears started turning, there would be no stopping it. But what exactly was Musk planning? What would this disruption lead to? As Ryan worked the phone, Elon paced back and forth outside the terminal. He felt a sense of exhilaration that he hadn't felt in a long time. This wasn't about business as usual. This wasn't just another routine. This was something different. This was the moment he was going to show the world that no one, no system, no corporation, no institution, was untouchable. Minutes later, Ryan returned, a look of uncertainty mixed with a quiet resolve on his face. "The calls are made. The team is in motion," he said, his voice careful, as though measuring each word. "But Elon, are you really going to do this? Shut them down completely? Are you prepared for the fallout?" This could be bigger than you think. I've already made the decision, Musk replied, his voice firm. We're not just shutting them down. We're showing the world how easily the system can be toppled. We're exposing the hypocrisy, the power structures that exist only because people are afraid to question them. I don't care about the fallout. What I care about is making a statement. Ryan nodded, though his face betrayed the concern he was trying to hide. All right, let's do this. As Musk stood there, the wheels of his plan began turning, slowly at first, but gaining momentum with every passing second. He had already begun to contact journalists, key media outlets, and influencers to get the word out. What would start as a petty dispute in an airport terminal would soon spiral into something far more significant. This was the kind of disruption that Elon thrived on, the kind that created chaos but also led to change. But as Musk's plans began to take shape, something else began to happen. His resolve started to crack, just slightly. For the first time, he questioned if this was the right thing to do. Would he really shut down an entire airline because of a momentary disrespect? Was it worth risking his reputation, his entire empire, for something so trivial? Then he remembered what had gotten him here in the first place, the years of rejection, the constant battle to prove himself, the countless moments when people told him he couldn't, he shouldn't, it wasn't possible. He had learned long ago that the world didn't care about his feelings. The world only respected power. And he was ready to take his place at the top once and for all. By the time the sun rose over California, Musk was already at his desk. The calls had been made, the groundwork laid, and the press was waiting. But the real challenge was still ahead. How could he make the entire world pay attention to what had started as a petty dispute at an airport terminal? How could he turn this simple insult into a firestorm of disruption? Musk knew that in order to get the media's attention, he needed something far more significant than just a bold statement. He needed action. Something that would force the media to pay attention, something that would make his message impossible to ignore. That's when it hit him. He didn't just want to disrupt the airline. He wanted to disrupt the entire travel industry. The thought came to him like a lightning strike. Why stop with one airline? If he truly wanted to make a statement, he needed to expose the flaws and inefficiencies of the entire system, to show how deeply broken it really was. This wasn't just about one company. This was about taking down the system that people had come to accept as normal. And Elon wasn't going to be just another passenger. He wasn't going to sit idly by and accept the status quo. He was going to break it. He picked up his phone and called Ryan again. Get everyone together. I want a strategy session in the next hour. We're not just going after one airline. We're going after the entire industry. Ryan's voice came through the phone, sharp and urgent. Elon, are you serious? We're talking about an industry that brings in billions of dollars every year. You're talking about disrupting airlines, airports, the whole system. It's insane. I don't care, Musk responded, his voice cold but determined. The world needs to understand how broken this system is. And if I'm the one to show them, then so be it. Within the hour, Musk had gathered his inner circle, top executives from SpaceX, Tesla, and even some key people from his other ventures. Together, they mapped out a plan that would make waves across the globe. Musk's vision was clear. He would not only challenge the airline's treatment of passengers but also their reliance on outdated, inefficient systems. The public's frustrations with air travel were already well documented, but Musk was going to take it to a level no one could have anticipated. The plan was audacious, perhaps even reckless, but that's how Musk operated. He wasn't afraid to take risks, especially when he believed in the outcome. The first step was to rally the public, to make them aware of the systemic issues within the travel industry. This was more than just a fight for better treatment of customers. It was a battle for transparency, efficiency, and fairness in an industry that had grown complacent. Musk's team set up meetings with top journalists and media outlets, briefing them on the story and the massive scale of the disruption they were about to unleash. They knew that they would need the media's backing if they were going to reach the masses. The moment they had been waiting for had arrived. As the morning wore on, the first press release went out, an open letter from Elon Musk himself. The letter was bold, direct, and scathing. He called out the airline industry's archaic practices, its lack of transparency, and the way it treated its customers like cattle. He detailed the treatment he had received at the airport and positioned it as a larger issue that needed to be addressed. The world took notice. Within hours, the story went viral. Social media exploded with reactions from people who had felt the same frustrations but hadn't had the power, or the platform, to voice them. Articles were being written, debates were being held, and pundits were weighing in. But Musk wasn't just sitting back and watching. He was taking charge, making sure that the message got through loud and clear. It wasn't just the media that was reacting. The airline industry, which had previously been quiet about the matter, was beginning to respond. They issued statements trying to downplay the situation, attempting to spin it as a minor issue. But Musk wasn't letting them off the hook that easily. He wasn't done yet. By the end of the day, the situation had escalated to a level no one had expected. Musk had already pulled strings with his various business connections, pulling together a coalition of allies, tech moguls, industry insiders, and even some former airline executives who had worked in the field for years. Together, they would create an alternative to the existing system, something that would challenge the status quo in ways that hadn't been seen before. Musk's vision was now clearer than ever. He wanted to create a new, more efficient, and customer-centric model for air travel. It would be more than just a business, it would be a revolution in how the world thought about and experienced air travel. That evening, Musk made another move. He reached out to a rival airline, one that had been struggling to keep up with industry giants. He knew that if he could bring them on board with his vision, it would be a game changer. The rival airline, which had been desperate for innovation, saw the opportunity for partnership. Musk had succeeded in not only turning a moment of personal frustration into a public spectacle but in bringing a competitor into the fold, a move that would make the disruption even more unstoppable. Musk's team continued to work through the night, preparing for the next phase of the plan. As the clock ticked on, they were ready to make their next move. What started as a simple issue at an airport had now snowballed into something much bigger. The airline industry, and perhaps the entire travel system, was about to undergo a transformation like never before. Musk had set his sights on something far more ambitious than just getting back at an airline that had treated him poorly. He was about to embark on a journey that would change everything, about how people traveled, how businesses operated, and how power structures could be toppled in a single, strategic move. And this was just the beginning. By the time Elon Musk sat in the conference room, surrounded by his closest advisors, the full scope of what he had set in motion was becoming clear. This wasn't just another business maneuver or a fleeting moment of personal defiance. This had escalated far beyond anything he had expected. His team was working tirelessly, making phone calls, issuing press releases, and strategizing with partners and competitors alike. The media was relentless, and so was the public. People were rallying behind Musk's audacious move, some out of admiration, others out of sheer curiosity. But amid the chaos, Elon felt something he hadn't expected, a deep, gnawing sense of doubt. As he sat there, watching the latest news coverage unfold on his tablet, the gravity of the situation began to hit him. The initial exhilaration, the adrenaline of taking action, was wearing off, and what replaced it was an uncomfortable realization. He had already started a firestorm, one that would be impossible to put out. What if he was making a huge mistake? The media coverage was everywhere, headlines screamed, Elon Musk shuts down airline industry, and it's just the beginning, and a billionaire takes on the world's largest industry, the fallout is just starting. While some hailed him as a visionary and a crusader, others were starting to question his motives. Was this truly about reforming the broken airline system, Or was it just another one of Musk's publicity stunts, a way to assert his dominance and prove his power? Elon shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had faced adversity before, but this time felt different. He wasn't just fighting against corporate bureaucracy. He wasn't just challenging a flawed system. This time, he was up against a global behemoth, an entire industry, and the stakes had never been higher. The more he thought about it, the more it felt like he was standing on the edge of a precipice, with the ground beneath him crumbling away. As the hours ticked by, Elon's doubts grew. He couldn't help but think about the people who had supported him throughout his career, his employees, his investors, his family. What would they think? What would they say? Would they stand behind him, or would they abandon him in the wake of this decision? Mr. Musk, a voice broke through his thoughts. It was Ryan, his assistant, standing at the door of the conference room with a concerned expression. We've been getting reports of some serious pushback. A lot of influential figures in the industry are starting to speak out against you. Some are calling for your companies to be investigated. Others are questioning your motives. Elon didn't say anything at first. He simply stared at the screen in front of him, watching the news anchor's grim expression as she reported on the growing controversy. For the first time in his career, he felt vulnerable. There was a part of him, some small, human part, that feared the consequences of his actions. We've also been hearing from some of your allies, Ryan continued. They're worried about the backlash. A few of them have started distancing themselves. Elon let out a long breath and stood up from his chair, his mind racing. The weight of the situation was starting to settle in like a heavy fog. He had done what he always did, taken a bold step, disrupted the status quo, and shown the world that he wouldn't back down. But now he was faced with the reality of his decision. The public's response was growing more intense by the hour, and it wasn't all positive. Do we have any updates on the airlines themselves? Elon asked, his voice low. Have they responded to the media frenzy? Ryan nodded. They're trying to downplay it, but there's been talk of lawsuits. They're blaming you for the chaos and for interfering with their operations. Some have even threatened to pull their partnerships with Tesla and SpaceX. Elon's mind raced as he processed the information. This wasn't just a corporate fight anymore, it was personal. If the airline industry came after him with everything it had, there was no telling where this would end. His companies, his life's work, could be at risk. The emotional toll of the situation was starting to get to him. He had always prided himself on his ability to push through adversity, to take risks that no one else would dare to take. But this time, the consequences felt heavier, more real. Just then, the door to the conference room opened again, and in walked Grimes, Elon's partner. Her eyes were filled with concern as she stepped closer to him. Elon, she said softly, I've been following everything. You've really stirred up a storm. Elon didn't answer immediately. He couldn't. His mind was still too clouded by the enormity of what was unfolding. He had made his choice, but now he was starting to wonder if he could live with it. Grimes sat down beside him and placed a hand on his arm. You've always said that you want to make the world a better place. To challenge the systems that are broken. But do you think this is the best way to do it? Are you doing this for the right reasons, or is it just because they made you feel small? Elon looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and uncertainty. I'm doing this because I believe the system is broken. But I don't know if I can win this battle. I don't know if I've gone too far. Grimes took a deep breath and nodded. You don't have to do this alone. Whatever happens, I'm with you. Just make sure you're doing this for the right reasons. That's all that matters in the end. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had always been driven by his sense of purpose, his desire to change the world, to push the boundaries of what was possible. But in that moment, as he sat there with the weight of the world on his shoulders, he began to realize something. It wasn't just about challenging the system. It was about doing it in a way that was sustainable, that was responsible. He couldn't allow his personal frustrations to blind him to the bigger picture. For the first time, he wasn't sure where this journey would lead. But one thing was clear, he couldn't turn back now. As he stood up and faced his team, Elon made a decision. He wasn't going to back down, but he would approach the next phase of his plan with more caution. He wasn't just going to take on the airline industry. He was going to reshape it, and in the process, he was going to change the world. The following morning, as the sun rose over the sprawling expanse of SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California, Elon Musk stood at the window of his office, staring out at the landscape. The day felt unusually quiet, like the calm before a storm. It had been weeks since the incident at the airport, weeks since he had dared to take the fight to the airline industry, and now, the world seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the next move. His plan was in motion, but the weight of his decision lingered, heavy in his chest. The media had quieted down somewhat, but the corporate giants that Musk had targeted were not giving up. Legal teams were now in full swing, preparing counterclaims and arguing that Musk's interference was nothing short of reckless. But Musk wasn't concerned. At least not in the way everyone expected him to be. This wasn't about winning or losing in the traditional sense. No, this was about forcing the world to look at something it had been ignoring for far too long. The airline industry's lack of accountability, its treatment of customers as nothing more than numbers, had been allowed to persist for decades, and now Musk was going to make sure that the world couldn't look away. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts, and Ryan entered, a concerned expression on his face. "Elon," he began, "I think we need to talk about where we go from here. There's been some fallout from the recent developments. Some big names in the travel industry have started to speak out, and we've gotten word that several major airports are looking to cut ties with Tesla and SpaceX." Elon didn't react immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath and turned his gaze back to the window. He knew this day would come, the fallout, the resistance. But he had anticipated it. The question now was what he would do about it. "Let them," Elon finally said, his voice calm but resolute. "We're not going to back down. We're here to create change. If we lose a few allies along the way, so be it. The mission hasn't changed." Ryan hesitated before speaking again. "And the public backlash? A lot of people are still questioning your motives. Some are even saying you've gone too far." Elon looked at Ryan, his expression hardening. "I've been in the public eye long enough to know that the loudest voices are often the ones that speak the least truth. People question my motives now, but in time, they'll see the bigger picture. We've already started a conversation. That's all we need." There was a moment of silence as Ryan processed what Musk had said. He nodded slowly. "You're right. But we do need to be prepared for what comes next. This could get worse before it gets better." Elon turned back toward the window, his eyes scanning the horizon. He could feel the weight of the situation, but there was a sense of clarity, too. The journey that had started out of frustration and defiance had led him to a place where he was no longer concerned with the outcome in the traditional sense. He had set out to challenge a broken system, to force people to see the way things really were. And, in a strange way, that was enough. For the first time in his career, he realized that the path to success was not always linear. There were no guarantees. But if he could stay true to his mission, if he could continue pushing forward in the face of doubt and opposition, then he had already won. He turned back to Ryan and gave a small, knowing smile. "We'll continue. But we'll do it on our terms. And if people can't handle it, then they're not ready for the change we're bringing." The weeks that followed were filled with both tension and triumph. Musk's efforts to expose the inefficiencies of the airline industry gained traction, and as more people joined the conversation, the pressure on the industry became undeniable. But the real test came when Musk made the announcement that would change everything. He was moving forward with a plan to launch an alternative, more efficient air travel system. It was a bold, risky move. He had known that the airlines would fight back, but this was no longer about revenge or one-upmanship. It was about redefining the future of travel. Musk's vision was clear, an air travel system that was faster, more transparent, and more customer-friendly. It would cut out the middlemen, streamline the process, and give passengers a truly seamless experience. The announcement sent shockwaves through the industry. Airlines scrambled to respond, but it was already too late. The public was on Musk's side, and the groundwork for the new travel model had already been laid. For Elon Musk, this was the moment he had been waiting for. He had disrupted the status quo, but more importantly, he had forced the world to confront the flaws in a system that had gone unchallenged for far too long. The airlines couldn't ignore the mounting pressure, and soon, they began to realize that they would have to adapt or risk becoming irrelevant. But as the world watched and the industry grappled with the changes Musk had set in motion, one thing was clear: Elon had succeeded in his ultimate goal. He hadn't just challenged a broken system, he had given people hope that real change was possible. He had shown them that, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, a single individual could create a ripple that would change the world. In the end, Musk's journey wasn't just about the conflict with the airlines or the disruption of an entire industry. It was about finding the courage to take a stand, to fight for something bigger than oneself, and to push forward despite the overwhelming forces working against him. And in that, he had found not only success but a deeper understanding of what it meant to lead and to inspire. As he looked back on everything that had transpired, Elon knew that this was just the beginning. There were always new challenges ahead, new systems to disrupt, and new battles to fight. But he had proven something important: no matter how impossible the odds, change was always possible. And it started with one bold step. The world had changed in ways that no one had fully anticipated. Elon Musk had stepped onto the battlefield of the airline industry with a level of audacity that only he could muster, and now the dust was beginning to settle. But what came after the chaos? What was the true cost of his bold move? As Musk walked into the boardroom at Tesla's headquarters, the mood was tense. His senior leadership team was gathered around the table, papers scattered in front of them, their faces a mixture of determination and concern. The decisions that had been made in the past weeks had shaken the foundation of the company, but Musk knew they had no choice. They had set a new course, one that no one had expected to be this impactful. "Good morning," Musk said, breaking the silence as he sat at the head of the table. "I know you're all wondering what's next. But before we dive into the next phase of this journey, let's talk about where we are now. We've disrupted a system, but the real challenge lies ahead." The room was silent as everyone waited for him to continue. Musk's gaze swept across the room, his expression intense yet focused. He wasn't just leading a company, he was leading a revolution. This wasn't just about shaking up an industry, it was about rewriting the rules of business, pushing the limits of what was possible, and forcing the world to see things differently. The team had been on edge since Musk's dramatic move to challenge the airline industry. They had known it would be difficult, but they hadn't realized the scale of the resistance they would face. Lawsuits were piling up. Politicians were being lobbied by industry giants, trying to discredit Musk's efforts. The air was thick with pressure, but Musk wasn't backing down. "Not now. Not ever. I've been getting calls from all over the world," Musk continued, his voice steady but unwavering. "From people who believe in what we're doing, people who want to see this vision through to the end. But we can't afford to be complacent. We have to keep pushing, keep innovating. This battle isn't just about airlines anymore. It's about setting the stage for a new way of thinking about the future." His words hung in the air like a challenge, and no one moved or said a word for a few moments. The weight of it all, the media frenzy, the legal battles, the inevitable pushback, was starting to settle into their bones. But Musk was right. There was no turning back now. They had committed to something larger than themselves, and the only option was to push forward. "We've got investors to answer to, and public opinion is still split," Ryan, his assistant, spoke up, his tone cautious. "The backlash is loud, but it's also starting to subside. People are beginning to see this as less of a personal vendetta and more of a necessary disruption. But we need to make sure we're positioned correctly for the long haul. Elon nodded, acknowledging Ryan's point. He had always known that any great challenge would come with obstacles, but this was bigger than he had expected. The fight wasn't just in the media. It was embedded in the very fabric of the political and corporate world. The system had fought back, and now it was Musk's turn to solidify his place in the history books. "I don't want to hear about obstacles," Musk replied, his tone resolute. "I've never been afraid of a challenge, and neither should any of you. We don't need to wait for permission. We make the rules." Elon's eyes burned with the familiar fire that had propelled him to the top in the first place. He had faced seemingly impossible odds before, when launching SpaceX, when pushing Tesla's electric cars into the mainstream, and when he started working on the Hyperloop. And in this book, the story wasn't written by anyone else. "Let's talk about our next steps," Musk said, leaning forward. "We're going to launch a new platform that will completely change how people think about air travel. We're not just going to shake things up. We're going to build something better, something smarter. I want a new class of air travel, luxury and accessibility rolled into one. I want every part of the experience to be elevated, from the booking to the flight, to the way people interact with the service." Ryan took out a folder and placed it in front of Musk. "We've started working on a prototype for a high-speed, eco-friendly air vehicle. It's going to be revolutionary, and we've already had initial discussions with some potential investors who are on board with the concept. We've also been in talks with regulators to ensure we're ahead of the curve." Elon's eyes lit up at the mention of the prototype. This was it, the future he had envisioned. The technology would be groundbreaking, far beyond anything the current airline industry could offer. He had always believed that the answer to the world's most significant challenges lay in the convergence of technology, sustainability, and creativity. This was his opportunity to prove it. "I want that prototype in the air as soon as possible," Musk said with certainty. "We'll work with the top engineers, the brightest minds in the industry. But the one thing we can't afford is to slow down. Every moment we waste gives the competition more time to catch up." As the meeting continued, Elon's mind raced. The journey had been filled with unexpected twists and turns, but there was something about this moment that felt different. He had taken a stand, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever felt like the system was rigged against them. And while he couldn't predict what would happen next, one thing was clear: he wasn't alone in this fight. The world was watching, and he had a responsibility to continue leading, to continue inspiring. By the end of the meeting, there was a renewed sense of purpose in the room. Elon Musk had once again set his sights on the horizon, determined to shape the future as he saw fit. And now, the world would see just how far he was willing to go. The storm had passed, or at least it seemed that way. For a brief moment, there was a lull in the chaos. But Elon Musk knew better than to think the fight was over. If anything, it had only just begun. The world was now watching closely, and so were the other giants of the industry. Musk had not only upset the airline world, but he had also lit a fuse that was beginning to burn faster than anyone could have anticipated. Weeks after the announcement of his new venture into air travel, a wave of new competitors began to emerge. Investors saw opportunity in the gap Musk had identified, and suddenly, the air travel market was filled with startups, many of which had significant backing from powerful investors eager to capitalize on the disruption Musk had started. Companies were popping up left and right, each claiming to have the next big idea in air transportation. But Musk wasn't worried. After all, he had been here before. In fact, this was all part of the plan. It was no secret that Musk had a habit of shaking things up, not just by creating new technologies, but by forcing the competition to rise to his level. The true test would be how many of these newcomers could actually match his vision and innovation. But one thing Musk knew for sure: none of them would be able to match his relentless pursuit of excellence. As SpaceX continued to work on the high-speed, eco-friendly air vehicle Musk envisioned, the other companies were trying to catch up, but there was no real competition yet. Many of them lacked the technological prowess and the resources that Musk had at his disposal. They were starting from scratch, while Musk had decades of experience in the aerospace industry, a robust team of engineers, and the financial backing to bring his ideas to life. At Tesla, Ryan was watching the rise of these competitors with cautious optimism. He had always been skeptical of Musk's boldness. After all, starting something as big as a new mode of air travel was no small feat, but Ryan had seen Musk do the impossible before. And he believed that, once again, Musk was about to prove that the impossible was within reach. "We've got the advantage right now," Ryan said one morning as they sat in the conference room discussing the latest developments. "The new competitors may have funding, but they don't have what we have, our track record, our team, and the technology we're developing. If we can get the prototype in the air before they do, we'll have a huge lead." Elon leaned back in his chair, his hands steepled in front of him. "We will. But we can't take it easy. They're going to come at us with everything they've got, and we need to be ready. I want the prototype ready in record time. Speed is key." "But," Ryan hesitated, "do we risk spreading ourselves too thin with everything else we've got going on? SpaceX, Tesla, and now this. The media's been relentless, and we're going to have a lot of regulatory hurdles to overcome before we can even think about launching a new air system." Elon gave a small smile, his eyes glinting with the usual spark. "Ryan, I don't have time for what-ifs. I'm not in this to play it safe. When we set out to build Tesla, people told me it couldn't be done. When we started SpaceX, they said we'd never land a rocket. And now we're looking at launching a new air travel system. The world's waiting for it." Ryan didn't respond immediately, but he knew better than to argue. Elon was right. Time and time again, he had defied expectations. But this time, the stakes were higher. It wasn't just about the future of his companies anymore. It was about changing the world, and perhaps the future of air travel as a whole. Across the country, the new competitors were beginning to make moves. A startup named SkyShift had quickly gained traction, promising to revolutionize air travel with a sleek, electric-powered aircraft. They had a charismatic CEO named Lydia Winters, a former aerospace engineer with connections to major investors. The media was eating up her every word, as she painted herself as a disruptor just like Musk. SkyShift's rapid rise seemed to be Musk's worst nightmare, until he took a closer look. Lydia Winters' vision was impressive, but the more Musk dug into SkyShift's plans, the more he realized that they were all style with no substance. Their designs were flashy but lacked the practicality and efficiency Musk had built his career on. Their electric engines were underdeveloped, and their timeline for a working prototype was nowhere near as ambitious as Musk's own. They were a company trying to mimic what Musk had done, without the deep technological roots to back it up. Musk knew the media would play up the competition, but he wasn't concerned. He had already started to distance himself from the noise. His team was working diligently on the prototype, and although there were significant challenges ahead, they were making faster progress than anyone anticipated. He wasn't about to let SkyShift or anyone else get ahead of him. They had the luxury of time and learning from his mistakes, but Musk wasn't going to give them that advantage. Back at SpaceX, Elon and his team were working feverishly on what would eventually become known as the Hyperflight System, a revolutionary new high-speed air vehicle that would take passengers from one city to another in a fraction of the time it took current commercial airlines. It was designed to be environmentally sustainable, reducing carbon emissions significantly, and it could fly at speeds exceeding Mach 5. In theory, it was the perfect solution to the problems the airline industry faced. The first flight was scheduled for the end of the year, and despite the intense pressure, Musk was excited. This was his moment, not just for SpaceX, but for humanity's future in the skies. But even as the prototype neared completion, Musk couldn't ignore the competition. SkyShift was pushing forward with their own electric planes, and several other startups were doing the same. The media had already dubbed it the race to the skies, and the world was watching every move. Musk knew he couldn't just build a better product. He had to change the game entirely. It wasn't enough to just be a little faster, a little more efficient. He needed to create an air travel system that was fundamentally different, a system that would make the others obsolete before they even had a chance to launch. And so, as the countdown to the prototype's first flight continued, Musk knew this would be the ultimate test. Could he outpace an entire industry's attempts to catch up, or would the weight of the competition slow him down? The pressure was mounting as the days ticked by. Every engineer at SpaceX, every designer at Tesla, and every strategist within Musk's inner circle knew what was at stake. The countdown to the unveiling of the hyperflight prototype was set, and it felt as though the entire world was watching. The tension was palpable in the halls of SpaceX headquarters, a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Everyone understood that what Musk was attempting was not just groundbreaking, it was world-changing. Elon Musk had always lived on the edge, but this time, the stakes felt higher than ever before. This wasn't just about proving the doubters wrong. This was about rewriting the rules of an entire industry that had, for decades, remained virtually untouched by innovation. Musk wasn't just entering the airline business, he was aiming to redefine it. For months, engineers had worked around the clock to get the prototype ready. The hyperflight was a marvel of technology, sleek, efficient, and powered by cutting-edge sustainable energy. It had the ability to travel at speeds over 5 times the speed of sound, cutting the time it took to fly from New York to Los Angeles down to just under an hour. But the real beauty of it lay in its design, a futuristic, almost alien shape that exuded elegance while promising the most efficient, eco-friendly air travel imaginable. On the morning of the prototype's unveiling, Elon stood at the head of a conference table, surrounded by the engineers who had worked tirelessly to bring his vision to life. His face, as always, was unreadable. He rarely showed much emotion before a big presentation, but those closest to him could see the fire in his eyes. He wasn't just about to show the world a new airplane, he was about to deliver a statement, a bold declaration that he, and only he, was in charge of the future. "All right, people," Musk said, breaking the silence that had enveloped the room. "It's showtime. We've done everything we can. Now let's make history." With that, he turned and walked toward the stage where the hyperflight was waiting in all its glory. The press had been buzzing for weeks, but the mystery surrounding the prototype had only heightened the anticipation. The cameras were already rolling, the lights blinding, and a crowd of eager journalists and aviation enthusiasts had gathered. The moment had arrived. The crowd fell silent as Musk took the stage. His familiar confidence radiated from him, but today there was something different in the air. The energy was electric, filled with a sense of disbelief and awe. This was the man who had already changed the world with Tesla and SpaceX, and now he was about to do it again. "Thank you all for being here," Musk began, his voice steady but filled with purpose. "What we're about to show you isn't just a new mode of transportation. It's the future of air travel. It's what's possible when we push the boundaries of what technology can do, and when we dare to think beyond the status quo." He gestured toward the sleek prototype behind him, covered by a curtain. The audience could hardly contain their excitement, but Musk held them in suspense for just a few more seconds. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the future. This is the hyperflight." With a swift motion, the curtain was pulled back. Gasps filled the room as the hyperflight was revealed in all its glory. The sleek, aerodynamic design seemed to shimmer in the light, as though the vehicle itself was ready to take off at a moment's notice. The craft appeared far more like a spacecraft than a traditional airplane. Its sharp, curved edges, and smooth contours gave it an otherworldly quality. It was a stunning blend of futuristic design and practical functionality, a combination that had never been seen before in aviation. Musk stood proudly beside the craft, his face now beaming with pride. But he wasn't here to bask in applause. He had a point to make. "This is the future," he repeated. "We've created a vehicle that is capable of flying faster, more efficiently, and more sustainably than anything that has ever existed before. We've broken the limits of traditional air travel. The hyperflight isn't just a faster airplane. It's a revolution. It's the next step in human progress. The crowd erupted into applause, their excitement palpable. The media cameras flashed relentlessly as Musk continued to speak. Today marks the beginning of a new era in transportation. We will change how the world thinks about air travel. We will make the impossible possible, and we will do it in a way that is both efficient and sustainable. He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. In the next few months, we'll be taking this prototype into the air, and we'll be showing the world just how different the future of air travel can be. Get ready, because things are about to get very interesting. Back in the control room, the engineers who had worked tirelessly on the hyperflight prototype exchanged looks of disbelief and pride. They knew that this wasn't just another successful project for Musk, it was something bigger. They had helped create a piece of history, something that would change the way the world moved forever. But they also knew that the real test was yet to come. Despite the overwhelming success of the prototype's unveiling, Musk was already thinking about what came next. The next steps would require careful planning, securing regulatory approvals, and ensuring that the technology would be scalable. The competition wasn't standing still, and Musk was well aware that SkyShift, along with other rivals, were going to come at him harder than ever. But for now, it didn't matter. Musk had taken the first step toward his goal, and the world had taken notice. There was no going back now. Meanwhile, SkyShift's CEO, Lydia Winters, watched the unveiling from her office, her face a mixture of admiration and frustration. She had watched Musk's journey closely, and now she saw that he had once again raised the bar to a level that was going to be incredibly difficult to match. SkyShift had made headlines with their electric-powered aircraft, but it was clear that Musk's hyperflight was in a league of its own. Lydia couldn't deny it, Musk was a force of nature. But she wasn't about to back down. SkyShift had investors who were hungry for success, and she wasn't going to let Musk's hyperflight steal the spotlight without a fight. As she watched the press conferences unfold, Lydia's mind raced. She had to think fast, and she had to think big. There was no time to waste. Musk had just raised the stakes, and now it was her turn to make a move. She wouldn't let her company become an afterthought. As the day ended, Musk stood outside the hangar, looking out across the tarmac, the hyperflight now safely tucked away inside. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the entire facility. He was exhausted, but satisfied. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the world was finally starting to understand what he had been fighting for all along. But as he looked at the sky, he knew this was just the beginning. The future was unfolding, and he was ready to push it further than anyone could imagine. Elon Musk never took a moment to savor his victories. The day after the hyperflight prototype was unveiled, while the world buzzed with excitement and admiration, Musk was already on a plane to Washington, D.C. He had a meeting with the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, and he knew exactly what that meant: bureaucracy, red tape, and the possibility of months or even years of delays. The FAA would scrutinize every inch of his groundbreaking invention, but Musk wasn't worried. He had been through the regulatory ringer before, first with Tesla and then with SpaceX. This time, though, the stakes were even higher. The future of global transportation was on the line. As the plane cruised through the clouds, Elon sat back in his seat, staring out of the window. He wasn't one for idle thoughts, but the view from above was a reminder of what he was truly after. It wasn't just about building rockets or electric cars, it was about making humanity's future multiplanetary. And this new venture, the hyperflight system, was another step in that direction. If he could change air travel, then he could change how people connected with the world, and perhaps even how they would travel to other planets one day. The world, however, wasn't quite ready for that vision. The media had been quick to dub the hyperflight the next big thing, but the general public and the regulators weren't so sure. Traditional airlines and their powerful lobbyists were gearing up for a fight. They saw Musk as a threat, someone who wasn't playing by their rules and wasn't afraid to break them. And they were right. When Musk arrived at the FAA headquarters, he was greeted with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. The room was filled with officials, engineers, and policymakers, all of them eager to see if Musk's bold promises about the hyperflight could live up to the hype. He knew they were all thinking the same thing: was this visionary entrepreneur really capable of pulling this off? And more importantly, was he prepared to navigate the complex web of regulations that governed air travel? Musk wasted no time. As soon as the meeting began, he laid out his vision for the future of air transportation. "We're not just talking about a new airplane," he told the room. "This is the beginning of a new way of moving people. Hyperflight can reduce travel times across the globe, drastically cut carbon emissions, and reshape how people think about air travel. We have the technology to do this. The only thing standing in our way is outdated regulations." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. "I'm here to ask for your help. We can't wait years for this to be approved. The world needs this technology, and the world needs it now." There was a moment of silence. Musk had always been bold, but this was a different kind of boldness. He wasn't asking for permission in the usual way, he was challenging the FAA to adapt, to embrace the future. One of the senior FAA officials, an older man with a stern expression, finally spoke up. "Mr. Musk, you're asking for a revolution. And with a revolution comes risk. You can't simply disregard the safety protocols that have been in place for decades. Air travel is one of the most regulated industries in the world, and for good reason. The last thing we need is a new form of transportation that puts people's lives in danger." Musk nodded, unshaken. "I understand the importance of safety," he replied. "But I also understand that we can't keep moving at the same pace when the world is changing around us. Look at the automotive industry. We didn't wait for the old guard to catch up with electric cars, we built the future ourselves. We can do the same with air travel. We can make it safer, faster, and more efficient." The room was still. Musk's words hung in the air like a challenge, and for a brief moment, he could feel the shift in the room's atmosphere. There was no question that the FAA was nervous about the risks, but they couldn't deny that Musk was right about one thing: the world was changing, and it was changing fast. If they didn't act now, they would risk falling behind. After a long pause, the senior official spoke again, his tone less certain. "We will need to review the data, assess the risks, and ensure that all safety protocols are met. This is not something we can approve on a whim." Musk leaned forward, his voice steady. "I'm not asking for a whim. I'm asking for you to be part of the future. This is not about one man or one company. This is about the entire world, and the next step in human progress." The room fell silent again. For a moment, it seemed like Musk had won. But the senior official spoke once more, his voice now tinged with resolve. "We'll review the data. But be prepared for a long process. Change doesn't happen overnight, especially in an industry as entrenched as this one." Musk didn't flinch. "I'll be ready." As the meeting ended and Musk made his way out of the FAA headquarters, he couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline. The conversation hadn't gone exactly how he'd hoped, but it had moved the needle. For the first time in a long time, it felt as though the FAA was at least considering the possibility of a new kind of air travel. Musk knew that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey, but the first step had been taken. Back at SpaceX, the news was already being broadcasted, and Ryan and the rest of the team were waiting anxiously for Musk's return. They knew that if anyone could navigate the regulatory hurdles and push the boundaries of what was possible, it was Musk. But the road ahead was filled with challenges. "Did they give you any specifics?" Ryan asked as Musk walked into his office, his face a mix of exhaustion and determination. "They're going to review everything. It's going to take time," Musk replied, rubbing his temples. "But we've made progress. The future's in motion now. We just have to stay ahead of the curve. Meanwhile, Lydia Winters at SkyShift was keeping a close eye on Musk's every move. She had already begun ramping up her own company's efforts, hoping to capitalize on any potential delays or roadblocks that might slow Musk down. Her team was hard at work developing their own electric-powered aircraft, and they were making progress, slowly but surely. She had the backing of powerful investors, but Musk had the advantage of a head start. Lydia knew that if she could stay focused and keep pushing forward, SkyShift might just have a chance to beat Musk to the punch. But she couldn't afford to wait too long. The battle for the skies was heating up, and soon, the world would see who could claim the future of air travel. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Musk's meeting with the FAA had been a necessary battle, but the storm wasn't over. If anything, it had only just begun. While Elon and his team at SpaceX continued to refine the hyperflight prototype and await regulatory approval, the world outside was beginning to take notice in more ways than one. The hyperflight wasn't just an innovation in aviation, it was a symbol of what was possible when a single individual dared to dream bigger than anyone thought possible. But not everyone saw the new direction of air travel as a beacon of progress. The industry giants, the traditional airlines that had dominated the skies for decades, were nervous. And it wasn't just the FAA that Musk had to contend with, it was the entire aviation establishment, which was now bracing for the inevitable shakeup. On the other side of the globe, in London, SkyShift's CEO Lydia Winters was monitoring Musk's every move with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Musk had once again raised the bar, but she wasn't one to back down. SkyShift's engineers were making significant progress with their electric-powered aircraft, and Lydia was determined to prove that her company could outpace SpaceX and its audacious hyperflight. Lydia knew that timing was everything. She had been carefully orchestrating SkyShift's plans for months, and now she was ready to make her move. The unveiling of their own prototype was just around the corner, and she knew the competition would be fierce. If SkyShift could prove that they, too, were capable of revolutionizing air travel, then Musk would no longer be the only game in town. Back at SpaceX, Musk's team was working tirelessly to refine the hyperflight prototype, even as regulatory approvals and tests loomed large. The progress was slow, but that was always the case when it came to transforming an industry. Musk's mind raced with ideas. He knew that once the hyperflight passed all the hurdles, it would be a game-changer. But the challenge of staying ahead of the competition was already becoming apparent. Elon leaned over his desk, reviewing the blueprints for the next phase of the project. A sense of urgency buzzed in the air as the team worked day and night to ensure every detail of the hyperflight was perfect. Every test, every modification was being scrutinized. But even as Musk pushed his team to the limits, there was another undercurrent of tension: SkyShift. Have you heard about SkyShift's upcoming prototype? Ryan, SpaceX's lead strategist, asked one afternoon as he entered Musk's office, a tablet in hand displaying an article from the Wall Street Journal. Musk's eyes flickered to the screen. SkyShift was about to unveil their own electric-powered aircraft, aimed directly at competing with the hyperflight. "Let them," Musk said simply, leaning back in his chair. "It's what we wanted from the start. Competition is good, it forces us to keep pushing the envelope." Ryan nodded, though he didn't seem entirely convinced. "I don't know, Elon. They've been making quiet strides. We've seen their designs before. If they're even close to what we're doing, then we'll be even faster and more efficient. We don't have time to second-guess ourselves." Musk stood up and began pacing around the room. "They can play catch-up all they want. We've already set the bar. And we're not stopping." While SpaceX and SkyShift were locked in a race to redefine air travel, the public's fascination with the hyperflight was growing. On the news, online forums, and social media, people were already speculating about how this new technology would change their lives. Would it truly be possible to fly from coast to coast in under an hour? Would air travel become so efficient and affordable that it would finally put an end to long-haul flights? The possibilities seemed endless. Yet, the world was also skeptical. The aviation industry was a behemoth, and for all of Musk's talk about disruption, there were deep-rooted challenges. The FAA had yet to give any guarantees about approval, and no one knew how long it would take to clear the regulatory hurdles. Musk's confidence was undeniable, but even he couldn't be sure how soon the hyperflight would take to the skies. Back at SkyShift's headquarters, Lydia Winters was keenly aware of the mounting pressure. She had been keeping an eye on SpaceX's every move, and while she admired Musk's boldness, she wasn't about to let him dominate the narrative. SkyShift had its own innovations to showcase, and they were more than ready for the challenge. Lydia had just returned from a meeting with SkyShift's board of investors. Their eyes were on the horizon, hoping that their bold new aircraft could make waves before Musk's hyperflight had a chance to gain traction. The electric-powered plane they were building was capable of long-distance flights, efficient, fast, and far more eco-friendly than anything that had ever come before it. If they could get it into the air first, they could claim a major victory. Elon Musk might have SpaceX, but we have something he doesn't, Lydia said, speaking to her team in a meeting later that day. We have the financial backing, the public interest, and most importantly, we have a product that can compete on every level. Now it's up to us to make it real. Her team nodded in agreement, but there was an underlying unease in the air. Musk's hyperflight was getting all the attention, and some of the engineers couldn't help but feel a little behind the curve. Keep in mind, we don't need to outdo Musk right away, Lydia added, her tone measured but firm. We just need to prove we can keep up. We're not running the same race, but we can still win if we play it smart. As the days passed, the pressure was building on both sides. Musk's team at SpaceX was locked in a grueling race to meet the necessary tests, working through every technical and regulatory challenge that stood in their way. The hyperflight had already been through several rounds of testing, and each time, it had passed with flying colors, though Musk knew that the hardest part was still ahead. On the other side, SkyShift was pushing its own electric aircraft through a series of prototype tests. They were close, very close. But Lydia knew that their success would depend on their ability to move faster than the competition. With investors breathing down their necks, the pressure was mounting. The clock was ticking, and she couldn't afford to fall behind. The day arrived when SkyShift was finally ready to unveil their own prototype. The excitement in the air was palpable as investors, media, and engineers filled the hangar ere the aircraft had been carefully kept under wraps for months. Lydia stood at the front of the room, her posture perfect, her eyes fixed on the aircraft behind her. The prototype had been years in the making, and now, it was time to show the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Lydia began, her voice clear and confident. What you're about to see is the future of air travel. SkyShift's vision is simple, to bring sustainable, electric-powered air travel to the world. Today, we take that first step. With a dramatic flourish, the curtain was pulled back, revealing the sleek, modern design of SkyShift's electric aircraft. It was a beauty, elegant, efficient, and powerful. The crowd erupted into applause, but Lydia wasn't done yet. And this is just the beginning, she said, her gaze steely. SkyShift will be the company that leads the charge into a new era of aviation. Musk, who was watching the event unfold from his office in California, allowed himself a brief smile. The competition was heating up, and for the first time, he felt truly challenged. But that didn't scare him. It only made him more determined. Let the games begin, he muttered to himself, already planning his next move. The world was watching, and for Elon Musk, this was only the beginning. The unveiling of SkyShift's electric aircraft had certainly raised eyebrows. Lydia Winters had taken her shot, and her company's sleek new prototype seemed like a genuine contender. But Musk wasn't worried. If there was one thing he knew, it was that innovation wasn't about being first, it was about being bold enough to keep moving forward when everyone else stopped. And right now, everyone else was just catching up. SpaceX, however, wasn't just a company building rockets and exploring the stars. It was a symbol of Musk's relentless drive to transform the world. His latest venture, hyperflight, was designed to change the way people thought about flying, just as SpaceX had done for space travel. He didn't just want to compete, he wanted to disrupt. In the days that followed SkyShift's unveiling, Musk spent most of his time in meetings with his engineers, pushing them to refine the hyperflight prototype further. He knew the race was on. The hyperflight needed to be better, faster, and more efficient than anything SkyShift, or anyone else, could come up with. But that was always the challenge, wasn't it? The fight was never just to be the best at what you did. The fight was to become the standard. It was a late evening when Musk received the news. He had just returned from another round of testing at SpaceX's facility when Ryan entered his office with a concerned look on his face. "Elon, you need to see this," Ryan said, holding up his phone. Musk took the phone and glanced at the breaking news headline, "FAA delays hyperflight's approval indefinitely, citing safety concerns." Musk's jaw tightened as he read the article, which was filled with quotes from FAA officials stating that the hyperflight safety protocol still hadn't met the necessary requirements to receive approval for commercial flights. The delay wasn't just a bump in the road, it was a setback that could push the project back by months, possibly even years. "This is a huge blow," Ryan said, voicing Musk's own thoughts aloud. Musk set the phone down and leaned back in his chair, his face grim. He had expected resistance from the FAA, but he hadn't expected this level of pushback. "It's fine," Musk said, his voice quiet but resolute. "We're not going to let them win." Ryan didn't need to ask what Musk meant. He knew. While Musk focused on dealing with the FAA's roadblocks, Lydia Winters was starting to feel the pressure of her own success. SkyShift's prototype had been received with enthusiasm, but reality had begun to set in. Their electric aircraft was a marvel of engineering, but it was also far from perfect. There were technical challenges to overcome, particularly when it came to long-distance flight endurance. The battery systems were still being refined, and the overall cost of production was far higher than anticipated. Lydia paced the floor of SkyShift's headquarters, frowning at the financial reports on her desk. The pressure from investors was mounting, and they were growing impatient. The media attention had been positive, but it didn't guarantee profitability. The race with SpaceX was heating up, and if they were going to compete, SkyShift needed to solve its technical challenges, fast. But as much as Lydia hated to admit it, SpaceX's hyperflight had set a bar that was nearly impossible to reach. And now, with the FAA's latest decision to delay hyperflight's approval, she was realizing that the window of opportunity to outpace Musk might be closing sooner than she thought. Back at SpaceX, the mood was tense. Musk had gathered his core team of engineers and executives for a meeting. The news from the FAA had hit hard, but it hadn't broken their spirits. If anything, it had strengthened their resolve. Musk had always prided himself on facing obstacles head-on, and this was no different. "We've been here before," Musk said, addressing the team. "We're going to deal with this, just like we dealt with every other challenge. The hyperflight will fly. We just need to work smarter, work faster." Ryan stood at the back of the room, his arms crossed as he watched Musk rally the team. The engineers, who had been looking uncertain only moments earlier, now stood a little straighter. "We'll double down on safety," Musk continued, pacing across the room. "We'll bring in experts. We'll make this the safest and most efficient form of air travel the world has ever seen. And we'll prove that we are the future of flight." The team nodded, their spirits lifting. Musk's confidence was infectious. It always had been. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Lydia Winters found herself dealing with her own set of challenges. SkyShift's electric aircraft had made waves, but as the company's engineers dove deeper into the design, they found flaws that they hadn't anticipated. The battery life wasn't quite where it needed to be for long-haul flights, and the manufacturing costs were skyrocketing. Lydia had known that pushing the envelope came with risks, but now she was feeling the weight of those risks more than ever. One night, after a particularly grueling round of meetings with investors, Lydia stood by the windows of her office, gazing out over the London skyline. She had built SkyShift from the ground up, and now it felt like everything was hanging by a thread. If they didn't overcome these hurdles, all of it, her dream, her company, her investors' faith, could collapse. But there was a fire in her. Lydia wasn't someone who accepted defeat easily. She had beaten the odds before, and she was determined to do it again. She picked up her phone and called her head engineer. "We need to push harder," Lydia said, her voice steady despite the anxiety gnawing at her. "I don't care what it takes. This has to work. We're not backing down." Back in the US, as SpaceX fought through regulatory hurdles and SkyShift struggled with technical issues, an unexpected twist in the story unfolded. A new player emerged in the game, a major multinational corporation with vast resources and a history of taking risks, Boeing. Boeing had been quietly watching the developments with both SpaceX and SkyShift. They had long dominated the aviation industry, but the rise of electric aircraft and hyperflight posed a new challenge. Boeing's leadership knew that they couldn't afford to let Musk or Lydia steal the future of air travel from under them. Their own electric aircraft project, codenamed Zephyr, had been in the works for years. Now, with Musk and Lydia's companies on the brink of revolutionizing flight, Boeing decided it was time to step into the ring. The news of Boeing's entry into the electric aircraft race sent shockwaves through the aviation industry. With their deep pockets and decades of experience, Boeing's involvement raised the stakes significantly. As the competition grew more intense, Musk found himself facing a new set of challenges. It wasn't just about dealing with the FAA or refining the hyperflight prototype anymore. It was about defending his vision against two powerful adversaries. And for the first time, Musk felt the weight of the battle ahead. The stakes had never been higher. Elon Musk paced restlessly through the corridors of SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California. It had been a week since the FAA's devastating delay, and the impact of that decision was beginning to ripple outward. The company had worked tirelessly to build the hyperflight, but now, regulatory approval hung in the balance. For the first time in a long while, Musk felt uncertain. Despite his outward calm, inside, a storm was brewing. The hyperflight was more than just a personal project, it was the culmination of everything he had worked for. It wasn't just about taking passengers on ultra-fast flights, it was about proving that space-age technology could be applied to Earth's skies. But now, with the FAA questioning its safety and other aviation giants like Boeing entering the fray, the stakes had never been higher. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a message from his lead engineer, Jenna. "We need to talk. Urgent." Elon's fingers tapped the screen to respond. "I'll be in your office in 10. Jenna was already waiting when Musk arrived at her office, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. The screen of her computer was filled with test data and charts, none of which made sense to Musk at first glance. She didn't waste any time. "Elon, we've run into a major issue. It's with the propulsion system. We've been fine-tuning it for weeks, but it's still not achieving the output we need for long-range travel. I don't think we're going to meet the expected performance benchmarks unless we rework the entire system." Musk's face hardened. He had expected setbacks, but this was different. If the propulsion system couldn't meet expectations, the entire hyperflight project could be delayed indefinitely. He leaned over Jenna's desk, his eyes scanning the data on her screen. "What are we talking about here? How much time do we have?" Musk asked, his voice low but urgent. "At this rate, we'll need at least another 3 months of testing to even get it close. Maybe longer if we have to do a complete redesign." Musk stared at the numbers, his mind already racing through possible solutions. 3 months wasn't an option. The competition wasn't waiting. And with Boeing and SkyShift both gaining traction, the clock was ticking faster than ever. "We can't afford that. Find a workaround. Get me something faster. I'll give you everything you need, but we're not delaying this anymore. Jenna hesitated but nodded. We'll try, but this is going to be risky. We'll need to cut corners, and it may impact performance. Musk straightened, his mind already shifting into overdrive. He had never been one to shy away from risk, especially when the potential payoff was so massive. If there was a way to speed up the process, they'd find it, no matter the cost. We don't have a choice, Musk said, turning toward the door. Do whatever it takes. Just make it happen. Meanwhile, across the globe in London, Lydia Winters was facing her own set of obstacles. SkyShift had unveiled its electric aircraft just days ago, and while the response had been overwhelmingly positive, the pressure to deliver was suffocating. Investors were demanding results, and the technical team was already feeling the strain. Lydia stood in the middle of the SkyShift design lab, staring at the latest set of projections on the digital screen. The aircraft looked sleek, too sleek, perhaps. Despite the positive feedback, there was an unsettling reality that SkyShift's plane was still far from perfect. The performance benchmarks for battery life, weight distribution, and fuel efficiency were all falling short of expectations. Her head of engineering, Tom, walked up beside her, his expression grave. It's not enough, Lydia, Tom said, his voice clipped. We're running out of options. The prototype is good, but it's not scalable. We're not going to meet the targets, and if we can't fix the issues in the next few weeks, we'll lose our lead. Lydia turned to him, her jaw set. She wasn't about to let SkyShift's momentary success unravel so easily. We've made progress, Tom. We can make this work. Tom didn't look convinced. I want to believe that. But the battery tech is still the biggest hurdle. We're at least 2 years away from a breakthrough that could make this practical for long-distance commercial flights. At the pace we're going, we might be out of the race before we even get started. Lydia's fists clenched at her sides. We don't have 2 years, Tom. We don't have one. As if the pressure from the FAA and technical setbacks weren't enough, Elon Musk was about to face an entirely new challenge. News began circulating in the aviation industry that Boeing was preparing to launch its own electric aircraft, a direct competitor to both the Hyperflight and SkyShift's plane. Boeing, with its decades of experience and massive financial resources, was poised to become the new giant in the race for the future of air travel. Elon stared at the announcement on his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen as the news spread like wildfire. Boeing announces Zephyr, a next-generation electric aircraft set to revolutionize long-haul travel. The pressure was mounting on all sides. Boeing had been silently working on Zephyr for years, and now, they were ready to go public. Elon knew that Boeing's entry into the market was not just a challenge, it was a direct threat to everything he and his team had been working on. With the combined weight of Boeing's reputation and their technological know-how, Zephyr could very well change the entire trajectory of the electric aviation race. But Elon wasn't known for backing down from a fight. Get me a meeting with the FAA, he muttered under his breath, already planning his next move. If he was going to beat Boeing at their own game, he would need to move faster than anyone ever thought possible. The future of air travel was at stake, and Musk wasn't about to let anyone take it from him. Back at SkyShift, Lydia watched the Boeing news with a mixture of dread and determination. SkyShift was still recovering from its own internal struggles, but now the game had changed entirely. Boeing's resources, scale, and expertise made them a formidable adversary. SkyShift had been underdogs in the race against Musk, but now they were fighting a three-way battle. She took a deep breath and turned to her team. We need to step up. This is our moment. If we don't make this work, we might as well pack up and go home. Her voice was steady, but inside, she felt the weight of the challenge. She wasn't about to let Boeing or Musk win this fight, no matter how tough the road ahead might get. In the coming days, SpaceX ramped up its efforts, pushing forward with a sense of urgency that was palpable. The FAA had been giving them the runaround for weeks, but now Musk was ready to face them head-on. The hyperflight would fly, and nothing, not Boeing, not SkyShift, not the regulators, was going to stop him. And Lydia? She wasn't backing down either. SkyShift was on the edge of something great, and she was determined to lead her team through the storm. As the competition heated up, the question was no longer about who had the best aircraft, it was about who would hold their nerve and win the race for the future of aviation. The atmosphere at SpaceX headquarters had changed. The once bustling offices filled with the hum of engineers, technicians, and designers now felt more like a war room. Elon Musk had never been one to shy away from competition, but the stakes were higher than ever before. With Boeing officially entering the race and the FAA's regulatory bottleneck still unresolved, Musk was more determined than ever to prove that hyperflight was the future of aviation. Sitting at the head of a long table surrounded by his top engineers, Musk could feel the pressure mounting. Ryan, his ever-loyal chief operations officer, stood by the whiteboard, writing down goals and deadlines in bold red marker. The room was silent, save for the sound of marker strokes and the faint hum of computers processing data. Elon, Ryan began, breaking the silence, the timeline is getting tighter, but if we push forward with the redesign of the propulsion system as Jenna suggested, we might be able to cut down the delays. It's risky, but we could have something ready in a month, maybe less. Musk looked up from his phone, eyes narrowing. No, a month won't cut it. Boeing's Zephyr is already making waves, and SkyShift is still in the game, pushing for their own breakthroughs. We need something faster. Ryan hesitated. That's risky, Elon. If we move too fast, we could end up with a plane that's not ready for approval. Or worse, one that crashes in the test phase. Musk stood up, his eyes sharp. We don't have the luxury of time, Ryan. We've built the future, but right now, we're stuck in the past. I'm not going to let Boeing or anyone else take what's ours. Push the team harder. If we don't get this done, I'll find a way to make it happen myself. Ryan knew better than to argue. When Elon Musk had made up his mind, there was no changing it. He nodded, a sense of resolve growing in his chest. We'll do it, he said. Across the Atlantic, Lydia Winters was facing her own mounting pressures. SkyShift had taken the aviation world by surprise with the launch of their electric aircraft prototype, but the realities of mass production and meeting investor expectations were starting to settle in. Investors who were once enamored with the sleek design and forward-thinking tech were now questioning whether SkyShift could deliver. Lydia sat in her office, looking at a new set of projections on her computer screen. The battery life, once the company's strongest selling point, was now proving to be the biggest obstacle. She knew she was playing with fire. The timelines were growing tighter, and the competition was getting fierce. We're behind, Tom, her head engineer, said, walking into the office with a stack of papers in his hands. The tech we've been working on just isn't cutting it. We're at least 2 years away from a battery breakthrough. Investors are already talking about pulling funding if we can't make something work. Lydia felt her chest tighten at the mention of the funding issues. SkyShift had come so far, she couldn't let it all fall apart now. I won't let that happen, Tom. We have a responsibility to everyone who believes in us. She glanced out the window, the bright lights of London glimmering against the dark sky. She had always loved this view. But right now, it felt like a reminder of everything she had to lose. Investors, customers, employees, they were all counting on SkyShift to deliver. The world was watching, and the clock was ticking. We need something drastic, she said, turning back to Tom. If we don't hit that milestone, we'll lose everything. We've got to take some risks. Find a way to make it happen. Tom was silent for a moment, his brow furrowed. Then he spoke, slowly and deliberately, it's not going to be easy. But we can do it. If we change the approach to our propulsion system, we might be able to optimize it quicker. We've been playing it too safe. Lydia nodded, the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. She wasn't used to playing it safe, but sometimes, it felt like every decision was a gamble. Do whatever it takes, she said. We can't afford to sit on the sidelines. Back in the US, news of Boeing's entry into the electric aircraft race had sent shockwaves through the industry. With their decades of experience and enormous resources, Boeing's Zephyr project was poised to take over the electric aviation market. The press had already dubbed it the next big thing, and the rumors surrounding the aircraft's capabilities were enough to make even Musk pause. It was then that Musk knew, SpaceX couldn't just rely on pushing the limits of aviation technology, they needed to break every boundary in sight. If we're going to go up against Boeing, we can't just build another airplane, Musk said to Ryan one evening, his voice laced with intensity. We need to create something that no one's ever seen before, something so bold, so revolutionary, that it'll make the world rethink everything it knows about air travel. Ryan raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? Elon smiled, a gleam in his eye. We'll build a spacecraft for the sky. SkyShift wasn't going to give up without a fight either. Lydia knew that if she wanted to stay in the game, she would have to do something bold. She needed to push SkyShift to new limits, and she needed to do it quickly. She called her team together in an emergency meeting, her voice unwavering. We've been playing by the rules, she began, looking each team member in the eye. But the rules are changing. SpaceX has already shown what they're capable of, and now Boeing is coming after us. If we're going to survive, we need to think bigger. Tom was the first to speak. What are you suggesting? Lydia's voice grew firm. We stop worrying about the small stuff. We stop worrying about following the same path everyone else has taken. We need to build a plane that will change the game entirely. If we want to stay ahead, we can't just match what SpaceX and Boeing are doing, we need to do something no one has ever considered. The room fell silent. Lydia had always been a visionary, but this was bigger than any idea they had ever discussed. Are you with me? She asked, her eyes scanning the room. Tom didn't hesitate. Always. As the race for the future of air travel intensified, it became clear that both Musk and Winters were willing to go to extraordinary lengths to win. They weren't just building airplanes anymore, they were building legacies. Boeing's Zephyr may have been the new kid on the block, but it was SpaceX's daring ambition and SkyShift's relentless pursuit of innovation that would ultimately define the future. The battle for supremacy in the skies was just beginning, and no one, not even Musk, knew who would come out on top. The air in SpaceX's headquarters was thick with anticipation. For days now, Elon Musk had been locked away in intense meetings with his engineers and designers, poring over every detail of the hyperflight project. They were up against a wall. The competition had grown fiercer, and the clock was ticking. If they didn't make a significant breakthrough soon, SpaceX risked losing its lead to Boeing and SkyShift. Musk had made the decision, they would take a bold gamble. It wasn't just about refining the aircraft they had already designed, it was about pushing the boundaries of what was possible in aviation. If they could create a craft that wasn't just an aircraft but something that blurred the line between plane and spacecraft, it would change everything. Elon, we've been reviewing the data on potential fuel sources for the craft, said Ryan, his voice low but urgent as he sat across from Musk in a sleek conference room. But the idea of integrating space-grade technology into an aircraft is unprecedented. It could work, but we'd be breaking all kinds of aviation regulations. We'd have to start from scratch. Musk's eyes gleamed with intensity. That's the point. If we don't push the envelope, we'll get left behind. We're not trying to build another commercial aircraft, Ryan. We're trying to redefine aviation. The world doesn't need another plane, they need the future. Ryan leaned back in his chair, looking both excited and anxious. So we're going for it. The spacecraft-inspired design. Musk's lips curled into a smile. Exactly. This won't be a plane. This will be a new kind of vehicle. We'll integrate technologies from both aerospace and aviation, advanced composites, hybrid engines, even principles of rocket propulsion. If anyone can make this work, it's us." Ryan hesitated for a moment, still processing the gravity of Musk's words. The world had never seen anything like this before. And the regulatory bodies? "We'll deal with that when we have something in the air," Musk said, his voice steady but resolute. "Once they see the potential, the rules will bend. We'll make them bend." Meanwhile, at Sky Shift, Lydia was feeling the pressure of her own gamble. She had committed her company to an entirely new approach, one that defied convention in every way. Instead of continuing down the familiar path of electric aviation, Sky Shift was going to turn heads with something radically different, a fully sustainable hybrid system that could outlast both the Hyperflight and Zephyr. Her team had been hard at work on the new propulsion technology, and Lydia knew they were getting close. The potential was enormous, but so were the risks. She had seen how quickly investors could pull out when things didn't look perfect, and Sky Shift was already skating on thin ice financially. "What do you think, Tom?" Lydia asked, pacing around the design lab. "Will this hybrid system work?" Tom glanced at the intricate schematics on his screen, his expression focused. "It's risky, Lydia. We're testing uncharted territory. If the hybrid system works as intended, we'll be able to extend the range and efficiency of our aircraft like nothing else on the market. But if it fails, we'll be out of options." Lydia stopped pacing and fixed her gaze on him. "We can't afford to fail." Tom sighed, his shoulders slumping. "No, we can't. But if anyone can make this work, it's us. You've always said we need to think outside the box. Well, this is it. We've got to take the leap." Lydia nodded. "All right. Let's push forward. We're not backing down now." Back at SpaceX, things were moving at a rapid pace. Elon Musk had made the call to integrate aerospace-grade propulsion systems into their design. In many ways, it was a monumental risk, a risk that could either lead to groundbreaking innovation or utter failure. But Elon had never been one to play it safe. The stakes had always been high, and the rewards were even higher. As Musk sat in his office late into the night, reviewing data and test results, his mind wandered. The Hyperflight was supposed to change everything. This wasn't just a business venture, it was his vision of the future, a vision where humanity could finally conquer the skies and space. But to make it work, to make it truly transformative, they would have to push the boundaries of aviation and space exploration to their limits. In the quiet of the night, a voice pulled him out of his thoughts. "Elon, we've got a situation," Ryan said, walking into his office with a grim look on his face. Musk looked up, his heart rate quickening. "What's happened?" "FAA," Ryan began, pausing for a moment. "They're questioning the integration of space technology into an aircraft. They want us to stop all testing until we meet their approval. They're not sure the project is safe." Elon's mind went blank for a moment. The FAA had been difficult from the beginning, but this was different. They had always been a roadblock, but now they were standing in the way of his vision. The regulations, the bureaucracy, it was all just an obstacle, a chain holding him back from realizing his dream. "Elon, this is bad," Ryan said, his voice betraying the gravity of the situation. "If we don't get this approval, we can't move forward with testing. It could set us back months, maybe even years." Elon stood up, his mind racing. "Get me a meeting with the FAA. We're going to push this through. No more waiting." Across the world, Sky Shift was facing its own set of challenges. Lydia had just received an unexpected call from one of her investors. "I'm afraid we can't continue to back Sky Shift under these circumstances," the voice on the other end of the line said. "We need to see more concrete results, Lydia. You need to show us that this hybrid system is going to work, otherwise, we'll have to pull out." Lydia felt the weight of the words settle in her chest. The financial backing she relied on was now hanging by a thread. She had to deliver, or everything would come crashing down. I understand, Lydia said, her voice steady despite the panic she felt inside. But we are close. The hybrid system is almost ready for testing. Just give us a little more time. I'm sorry, Lydia, but time is something we don't have. You need to show us progress now. The call ended, and Lydia stared at her phone, her thoughts racing. They needed to prove they were capable of competing. The future of SkyShift depended on the success of the hybrid propulsion system. Failure was not an option. Back in the US, the FAA meeting had been set. Elon Musk wasn't going to let the regulators stand in his way. He walked into the conference room, flanked by his top engineers and legal team, and took a seat at the head of the table. The room was full of bureaucrats, stuffy suits and stern faces, but Musk had a plan. He wasn't there to negotiate, he was there to convince them. Gentlemen, let's cut to the chase, Musk said, his voice calm but commanding. SpaceX is building the future of air travel. The technology we're developing isn't just a plane, it's a leap forward for humanity. It's a spacecraft for the skies. We're not waiting for approval. We're pushing forward with or without you. There was a moment of silence before one of the FAA officials spoke up. Mr. Musk, you're asking for a lot. The integration of space technology into a commercial aircraft raises serious safety concerns. We can't just bend the rules for you. Musk leaned forward, his eyes sharp. I'm not asking you to bend the rules. I'm asking you to recognize that the rules need to change. The world is changing, and we need to be ahead of that change. You can either be part of the future, or you can be left behind. The days following Elon Musk's meeting with the FAA were a whirlwind of tension and strategy. The meeting had not gone as smoothly as he had hoped. The FAA had expressed serious concerns about the integration of aerospace-grade propulsion systems into commercial aircraft, but Musk had not backed down. He knew that the future of aviation wasn't going to be dictated by outdated regulations, it would be defined by those bold enough to push beyond them. He sat in his office, his fingers tapping impatiently on the desk as he reviewed the latest reports. SpaceX had made significant strides with their hyperflight project, but the weight of bureaucracy still loomed large. The regulators were still unsure, and Musk was beginning to feel the pressure to prove that the risk was worth the reward. Ryan entered the room, a stack of papers in his hand. Elon, we've got an update from the FAA. They've agreed to allow us to continue our testing under specific conditions, but they're requiring additional safety measures. It's a compromise, but it buys us time. Musk's brow furrowed as he scanned the report. The additional safety protocols were significant, and implementing them would slow down their progress. But this was what it had come down to. Compromise. Musk didn't like it, but it was better than a full halt to the project. Time, Musk muttered under his breath. That's what we don't have. Ryan nodded, understanding the sentiment. We're going to push through, right? Of course, Musk replied, his voice firm. But now we need to move faster than ever. No more delays. Meanwhile, at SkyShift, Lydia Winters was dealing with her own brand of pressure. The hybrid propulsion system was close to being tested, but the financial backers were growing increasingly impatient. Every day that passed without a clear breakthrough brought them one step closer to pulling out of the project. Lydia had been working tirelessly, but no matter how many hours she put in, there was always another obstacle to overcome. Sitting in her office, staring at the data sheets, Lydia felt a weight she hadn't felt before. She was a visionary, a pioneer in her own right, but even she couldn't ignore the reality that SkyShift was on the brink of collapse. Her phone rang, and Lydia picked it up without hesitation. Lydia, it's Tom, the voice on the other end said. We've got a problem. The first round of testing for the hybrid system is complete, but we're seeing some unexpected issues with the fuel efficiency. It's not as good as we predicted. Lydia felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean, not as good? We're looking at a drop in performance. Not much, but enough to be concerning. We might need to rework the system completely. Lydia slammed her fist down on the desk. We don't have time for that. We don't have time for reworks. Get me a solution, and get it now. Tom's voice was steady but resigned. I'll get to work on it immediately, Lydia. We'll figure it out. But we can't rush this. We need to be cautious. Cautious? Lydia snapped. No, Tom. We don't have the luxury of caution anymore. She hung up the phone and buried her face in her hands. The pressure was suffocating. SkyShift had the potential to be a game changer, but if they didn't fix this issue, they would lose everything. The investors were already restless, and without the promised breakthrough, they would pull their funding. And if that happened, Lydia's dream, SkyShift's dream, would fall apart. Days turned into weeks, and the race for the skies intensified. Musk and his team at SpaceX were determined to push forward, no matter the cost. The additional safety protocols imposed by the FAA were nothing more than a minor hurdle, something they could easily work around. The real challenge, however, was refining the technology itself. The propulsion system had to work seamlessly for the hyperflight to be successful, and time was rapidly running out. Musk found himself spending countless hours in the test labs, watching engineers and scientists scramble to optimize the systems. There were moments of progress, moments of hope, but also moments of failure that only fueled Musk's desire to prove that SpaceX was capable of something no one had ever seen before. But in the back of his mind, Musk couldn't shake the thought that the competition was only growing stronger. Boeing's Zephyr was gaining traction, SkyShift's hybrid system was edging closer to a breakthrough, and the world was watching. The next few weeks would be critical. They had no room for error. Lydia, too, was facing her own set of sleepless nights. The issues with the hybrid propulsion system weren't easy to fix, and Tom's latest updates weren't promising. The range had decreased even further, and the fuel efficiency was still below the industry standard. SkyShift's future was slipping away, and Lydia was running out of ways to pull them back from the edge. She called another emergency meeting, gathering the top engineers and designers in a small conference room. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone sat silently, waiting for Lydia to speak. We're out of options, Lydia began, her voice steady but filled with an underlying urgency. The investors are on the edge, and our hybrid system isn't performing as expected. If we don't make something work now, we're done. SkyShift is finished. Tom spoke up. We could shift our focus to a more traditional design, something less innovative but safer. It might not be revolutionary, but it would get us through the immediate hurdles. Lydia shook her head. No. SkyShift was never about playing it safe. We're not here to build another airplane. We're here to change the game. I won't give up now. She stood up and walked to the whiteboard, where she began sketching new ideas, new approaches, new systems. The team watched in silence as she worked, each stroke of the marker representing a potential solution to the crisis they were facing. I know this is risky, Lydia said, pausing to look at the team. But we're going to push harder. We're going to break through, and we're going to build something that no one has ever seen before. There was a quiet murmur of agreement from the team. They had seen Lydia's determination before, and they knew she wasn't going to stop. Not now. Back at SpaceX, the tension was at an all-time high. Musk's relentless push to make the hyperflight a reality had paid off, sort of. The propulsion system was functioning better than it had in previous tests, but there were still kinks to work out. The engineers were exhausted, and the stress was starting to take its toll. Ryan walked into Musk's office late one evening, his face lined with fatigue. Elon, we've got a situation. The propulsion system is almost ready for the next test flight, but we've run into some issues with the navigation controls. The plane's stability isn't what it should be. Musk clenched his jaw. I don't care about the issues right now. Fix them. We have to get this done. Ryan nodded, but Musk could tell he was worried. They had already sacrificed so much time and effort. Any further delay could be disastrous. We'll get it done, Ryan said. We're close, Elon. But we need to make sure we get it right. Musk's eyes were hard with determination. We don't have time to get it right, Ryan. We have to make history. The countdown was on. Musk's team at SpaceX was working around the clock, racing against the clock to perfect their hyperflight technology. Every test, every adjustment, brought them closer to the breakthrough they needed. The competition was fierce, and SkyShift was closing in fast with their hybrid propulsion system. The world had no idea just how high the stakes were, but in the quiet corners of these two companies, the pressure was suffocating. Musk sat in his office, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk, a deep furrow in his brow. The latest test had been promising. But promising wasn't good enough. He needed results. There was no room for half measures now. The FAA had allowed them to continue, but they were watching closely. He knew the moment they had something solid, something that could prove the worth of the hyperflight, the regulations would change, but he needed more time, and time was something they didn't have. His phone buzzed on the desk, breaking his concentration. He picked it up, expecting another routine update, but the name on the screen made his heart race, Ryan. Yeah. Musk answered quickly, trying to keep his voice steady. Elon, we've got a major problem, Ryan said. The latest navigation software update failed. The system is still unstable at high altitudes. We can't risk another test until we get this under control. Musk closed his eyes for a brief moment, gathering himself before responding. How much time do we have? I'd say at least a couple of weeks before we can be certain we're ready for the next test, Ryan said. But that's if we work non-stop. Musk stood up abruptly. No, Ryan. We can't afford to waste that much time. Get me a solution. I want this fixed by morning. Understood. We're on it. Musk stared out the window of his office, the weight of the situation settling over him. They couldn't afford another delay. The FAA, the investors, the engineers, they all depended on him. And more than anyone, Musk knew that the world was watching. The pressure was suffocating. The stakes were higher than they had ever been. Across the globe, Lydia Winters was facing her own set of challenges. The team at SkyShift had been working tirelessly on their hybrid propulsion system. But with every step forward, there seemed to be 2 steps back. The fuel efficiency wasn't where it needed to be, and the range was still falling short. Investors were breathing down her neck, and without immediate results, they would pull out, and SkyShift's dream would collapse in on itself. Lydia sat in the war room, her face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. Data points, test results, and diagrams filled the room, but none of it gave her the breakthrough she needed. She pushed through the fatigue, ignoring the exhaustion that clung to her bones. There was no time to rest. Not now. Her phone buzzed. It was Tom again. Lydia, we've made a breakthrough on the hybrid system, Tom said, his voice excited but still tinged with caution. We've isolated the issue with fuel efficiency. If we make a few more adjustments to the propulsion system, we'll have the efficiency we need. It'll extend the range significantly. Lydia felt a surge of hope rush through her. How long until we can run the tests? We're close, but we need a few more hours of fine-tuning. But if it works, we'll be able to take the hybrid system into the next phase of testing. This could be it, Lydia. Her heart skipped a beat. All right, get it done. I'll be there in an hour. She stood up, determination flashing in her eyes. SkyShift was back in the game. But even as her mind raced with possibilities, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of her mind. It was a critical moment, and she knew that if they didn't deliver now, the consequences would be dire. The next morning, Musk and his team were back in the lab, testing the adjustments they had made to the Hyperflight's navigation system. The hours ticked by in a blur of wires, codes, and test flights. The pressure was mounting. Musk was pacing, walking between engineers and technicians, his mind constantly on the clock. He could feel the weight of the world bearing down on him. This was more than just a test. This was their future. Ryan approached him, a grim look on his face. "We've made the adjustments, but the system is still glitching during high-speed maneuvers. We're not out of the woods yet." Musk's jaw clenched, but he didn't say anything for a moment. He simply stared at the screens, each one flashing with vital information. "We're not stopping until it's fixed," Musk said finally, his voice low but firm. Ryan nodded. "We'll keep working." At Sky Shift, Lydia stood at the edge of the testing hangar, watching as the team conducted one final round of tests on the hybrid propulsion system. Her heart raced with each passing second. This was their moment. This was the breakthrough that could change everything for Sky Shift. Tom walked up to her, a relieved smile on his face. "Lydia, we did it. The system's performing beyond expectations. We've got the range we need, the efficiency is up, and it's stable. This is the system that will change the future." Lydia's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to scream with joy, to shout to the heavens that they had made it. But there was no time for celebration yet. She had a meeting with investors in just a few hours, and if the test results held up, they would be able to secure the funding to push forward into the next phase. If not, Sky Shift's dream would end here. She grabbed her phone and sent a quick text to Tom, "Make sure the data is perfect. We need to show them this is real." Then, she turned back to the hangar, her mind racing. This was their moment, but it would mean nothing if they couldn't get the investors on board. Sky Shift needed more than just an incredible system, they needed the funds to make it a reality. That afternoon, both companies were on edge. At SpaceX, Musk's team had managed to stabilize the navigation system, but they were still struggling to fine-tune it. The pressure was mounting as they prepared for the final round of tests. Musk knew that if this didn't work, they would lose the lead. The world would know who came out on top, and right now, SpaceX was fighting for its future. At Sky Shift, Lydia's meeting with investors was just as crucial. The data from the hybrid system was flawless, but the investors had their doubts. The hybrid propulsion system was a gamble, and Lydia needed to convince them that it was worth betting on. The hours ticked by. At SpaceX, the final test was underway. At Sky Shift, Lydia made her pitch. And the world outside these two companies held its breath. The tension between SpaceX and Sky Shift was palpable. The final tests were now looming, and everyone involved knew that this was the make-or-break moment. Each company had something to prove, something that could change the course of aviation forever. But one thing was clear, no one could afford to falter now. The countdown had begun, and both companies were fighting for their future. Elon Musk paced the length of the SpaceX testing hangar, eyes fixed on the large screens in front of him. The engineers had spent the past few days calibrating and optimizing the Hyperflight's navigation and propulsion systems. The air was thick with anticipation. Every person in the room understood the magnitude of what was about to happen. Ryan walked up to Musk, his face a mix of excitement and concern. "Elon, everything is in place. The system's ready for the final test. This could be the moment we've been waiting for." Musk didn't respond immediately. He couldn't afford to get too excited. His mind was racing through every possible scenario. The test flight had to be flawless. They had already invested so much time, money, and effort into getting here. If this failed, everything would unravel. "Make sure everything is double-checked," Musk said, his voice steady but intense. "I don't want any surprises." Ryan nodded. "We're on it. We're going to make this work." The engineers scattered, going over every inch of the system one last time. Musk stood there, arms crossed, staring at the massive screen displaying real-time data as his heart pounded in his chest. He could feel the pressure mounting. This wasn't just about a successful test, it was about proving that SpaceX could redefine the future of aviation, just as it had with space exploration. They couldn't afford to fail. At SkyShift, Lydia was sitting in the investor meeting, her nerves barely contained as she presented the results of the latest tests. The hybrid propulsion system was more efficient than ever before, the range had surpassed expectations, and the data was flawless. But still, the investors weren't convinced. They were hesitant, unsure whether the technology would actually hold up in a commercial setting. Lydia stood her ground, her confidence unwavering. She knew the system could change the industry, but she also knew how quickly the tide could turn. The investors had their doubts, and with good reason. It was a gamble. But Lydia was ready to go all in. "I know it's a risk," she said, meeting the eyes of each investor at the table. "But it's a risk worth taking. This hybrid propulsion system isn't just an incremental improvement, it's the future of aviation. And we have the technology to make it work. If we don't act now, someone else will." The investors exchanged glances, murmuring among themselves. Lydia's heart raced. She couldn't afford to let the investors back out now. SkyShift needed this funding. Without it, their dream would die before it even took off. Finally, one of the lead investors, a middle-aged man with graying hair, spoke up. "We'll need a few more days to run the numbers and make sure this is a safe bet. But you've got our attention, Lydia. We're not saying yes yet, but we're not saying no either." Lydia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That's all I need," she said with a tight smile. "Thank you. We won't let you down." As she left the meeting room, her mind was racing. They were so close. So close to securing the future of SkyShift and the revolution they'd been working toward. But the investors' hesitation still lingered in the back of her mind. What if they decided the risk was too great? What if they pulled out at the last minute? Lydia had to push that thought aside. She had to keep fighting. The final test flight at SpaceX was moments away. Musk stood at the front of the hangar, watching as the hyperflight was prepped for takeoff. The roar of engines filled the room as the team completed their last-minute checks. Musk's stomach churned. There was so much on the line, more than anyone outside of SpaceX could truly understand. Ryan came up to him, his expression serious. "Elon, we've gone over everything. The systems are fully operational. It's time." Musk nodded, his jaw set in determination. "Let's do this." The hyperflight slowly rolled onto the runway, its sleek, futuristic frame gleaming under the bright lights. Musk stood at the edge of the runway, watching as the plane prepared for takeoff. This was the moment. There could be no more mistakes. The world was watching, and SpaceX's future in aviation hung in the balance. With a sudden rush of power, the engines ignited, and the hyperflight shot down the runway. Musk's heart raced as the plane ascended into the sky. The test had begun. The plane climbed higher, the sound of the engines deafening in Musk's ears as the numbers on the screen ticked upward. The navigation system held steady, the propulsion system worked flawlessly, and for the first time in months, Musk allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. They were doing it. They were truly doing it. As the plane reached the test altitude, Musk stood, holding his breath. This was it, the moment that would either make or break everything. The real test would come during the high-speed maneuver. They had to push the limits. If the system held, they would have a winner. Ryan's voice crackled through the radio. "Elon, we're coming up on the high-speed test. The systems are green. This is it." Musk's grip tightened on the railing in front of him. "Do it." The hyperflight dipped into a steep descent, accelerating rapidly. The plane's speedometer surged as it plummeted, testing the limits of its newly calibrated system. Musk watched the numbers closely, every fiber of his being focused on the data that was coming in. Then, something went wrong. The plane suddenly veered to the left, its trajectory shifting unpredictably. Musk's heart skipped a beat. The flight data shifted from green to red in an instant. Abort the test. Musk shouted, panic rising in his chest. But it was too late. The plane veered dangerously, struggling to regain control. A loud crash echoed over the comms, and the room fell silent. Musk's worst fear had come true, the hyperflight had failed. Back at SkyShift, Lydia's phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Tom, "We've just received news. SpaceX's test failed. Something went wrong in the final maneuver." Lydia's breath caught in her throat. Could this be their moment? Would the world now look to SkyShift as the future of aviation? She quickly responded to Tom, urging him to prepare the team. SkyShift was ready to step in. They had the technology. They had the breakthrough. And now, it was time to take their place at the forefront of aviation history. The news of SpaceX's failure spread like wildfire. Within minutes, every news outlet, tech blog, and aviation forum was buzzing with the shocking update. The test that had seemed like the pinnacle of Musk's dream of revolutionizing aviation had come crashing down, literally and figuratively. The crash of the hyperflight was splashed across headlines, and the world watched in awe and disbelief. But in the halls of SkyShift, the mood was different. Lydia Winters and her team were no longer merely trying to catch up, they were in the lead. After months of working tirelessly on the hybrid propulsion system, the moment they had been waiting for had finally arrived. And now, the eyes of the world were on them. Lydia paced back and forth in the control room, her eyes glued to the screens as the final tests were being run on their hybrid system. Everything had been checked, double-checked, and triple-checked. The data from the previous day's trials was flawless. The fuel efficiency, the range, the performance under high-speed conditions, it all aligned. SkyShift was on the brink of something monumental, and there was no turning back now. "Lydia, everything's looking perfect." "We're ready," Tom said, breaking through her focused thoughts. He was standing beside her, a grin on his face that was hard to miss. "Let's make history," Lydia replied, her voice calm but carrying the weight of everything they had worked for. Across the world, Elon Musk was not only dealing with the fallout from the crash, but also trying to regroup with his team. The hyperflight's failure was a blow to SpaceX's reputation, and the media had already started to write it off as another failed venture. Musk couldn't let that happen. Not when they were so close. Ryan entered the room, his face tense. "Elon, we've been analyzing the data from the crash. It wasn't just a technical malfunction, it's a systemic issue with the new flight system. The systems we've been relying on are unstable at high speeds, and we'll need to rework the entire configuration." Musk's hands clenched into fists. He had known that the pressure was mounting, but this? This was something entirely different. His eyes narrowed as he fought back the rush of frustration and anger threatening to overtake him. "This isn't over, Ryan. We're not throwing in the towel. We'll fix this. We have to fix this," Musk said, his voice sharper than usual. Ryan nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. "Of course, Elon. We're all in." Meanwhile, back at SkyShift, Lydia was stepping into the spotlight. She stood at the front of a large auditorium, with investors, engineers, and journalists packed into the seats, eagerly awaiting the unveiling of the hybrid propulsion system. This was their moment to prove that they had what it took to surpass the biggest name in the industry. It was no longer about competing with SpaceX, it was about redefining the future of air travel. With the press of a button, Lydia triggered the first flight demonstration of their hybrid system. The large screen above the stage lit up, showing the live feed of the plane on the runway. The engine roared to life, and the plane began its steady ascent into the sky. Lydia's heart was racing. She watched intently, unable to tear her eyes away from the screen. The aircraft ascended smoothly, its engine humming with a quiet power that made it seem almost effortless. The fuel efficiency numbers flashed on the screen, showing near-perfect performance. Then, the real test began. The plane shifted into high-speed mode, and the hybrid propulsion system was put through its paces. The plane cut through the air with grace, reaching speeds and altitudes that had previously been unimaginable. The crowd was captivated. Lydia could feel their collective breath held in the air. As the plane completed its maneuver, it pulled off a perfect landing, without a single hitch. The audience erupted into applause. The demonstration was flawless. This, Lydia said, her voice clear and strong, is the future of aviation. The roar of applause filled the room. This wasn't just a success, it was a statement. SkyShift had just changed the game. Elon Musk was watching from his office, his eyes glued to the screen as he saw the SkyShift plane soaring into the sky. The images sent a sharp pang of frustration through him. They had done it. SkyShift had beaten them to the punch. The media was already buzzing about their success, comparing it to the recent failure of the hyperflight. But Musk wasn't one to back down. The loss stung, but it only fueled his drive further. He couldn't afford to let SkyShift steal the spotlight, not when SpaceX had come this far. There had to be a way to salvage the situation. He sat at his desk, his fingers running over the keyboard as he typed out a few quick messages to his team, asking for immediate updates on the next steps. It was clear that they needed a radical new approach. They couldn't simply keep pushing forward with the same failing system. They needed innovation. And they needed it now. A few hours later, as the news cycle swirled with the success of SkyShift's demonstration, Lydia found herself in a meeting with the investors. They were ecstatic, some even suggesting that SkyShift was now a front-runner for the future of aviation. But Lydia wasn't ready to get too comfortable. She knew that while today was a victory, tomorrow would bring new challenges. The competition wasn't going to sit idly by. We need to prepare for what's next, Lydia said, addressing the room of investors. This technology is groundbreaking, but we can't afford to relax. We need to scale quickly, secure further funding, and begin working with manufacturers. We also need to start testing with passengers as soon as possible. The sooner we can prove that this works in real-world conditions, the sooner we can begin changing the world. One of the investors, a well-dressed woman with sharp eyes, spoke up. How soon can we see the commercial model? We need to be ready to roll this out before anyone else does. Lydia nodded, her mind already working ahead. We're on track to have the commercial prototype ready for the next phase in 6 months. But we need full-scale funding to make that happen. As the day wore on, the success of SkyShift's test flight dominated the headlines. There was no doubt about it, SkyShift had positioned itself as the next big thing in aviation. Musk's team at SpaceX had a long road ahead of them to recover from the crash and the subsequent PR nightmare. But Musk wasn't a man who gave up easily. He knew that the battle for the future of air travel was far from over. The air was thick with tension in the boardrooms and hangars alike. As the world's eyes turned toward SkyShift's recent triumph, SpaceX found itself on the defensive, struggling to regain its footing. But Elon Musk, ever the visionary, was not one to let a setback define his future. He had already begun to pivot, working tirelessly with his engineers to redesign and rethink their approach to aviation. However, there was something more profound at play now. This wasn't just about technology. It wasn't about who could build the fastest or the most efficient aircraft. This was about proving the essence of Musk's unyielding philosophy, the willingness to fail in order to rise again stronger than ever. Lydia Winters, meanwhile, was basking in the success that seemed to come so effortlessly to her company. SkyShift's hybrid system had captured the world's imagination, and investors were eager to pour billions into the venture. But even as the accolades piled up, Lydia felt a gnawing sense of unease. The battle had only just begun. They had proven their technology, but the real fight would be in proving that they could outlast the competition, innovate beyond their initial success, and stay ahead in a rapidly changing industry. 2 weeks later, the entire aviation world was watching. SpaceX, having rebuilt its test system after the disastrous failure, was preparing for a new round of high-speed testing. This time, it was personal. The crash of the hyperflight had left Musk with a deep sense of urgency. This test would either restore their credibility or seal their fate. Musk stood at the edge of the runway, dressed in his usual black jacket, his face a mask of determination. His team was busy making final adjustments, double-checking every system, ensuring there were no variables left unaccounted for. The Hybrid Flight 2, a newly re-engineered aircraft, sat on the runway, gleaming under the late afternoon sun. It was their last chance to prove that they could still lead the charge in aviation. Ryan walked up to Musk, holding a tablet with the final flight diagnostics. "Elon, everything checks out. We're good to go." Musk looked at the plane. "This needs to work. No more mistakes." Ryan nodded. "We've done everything we can. It's time." With that, the ground crew moved into position, and the plane slowly began to taxi down the runway. Musk's heart raced as the aircraft gained speed. The previous failure had left scars, and no matter how many times they'd run simulations, nothing could match the intensity of this moment. As the plane reached takeoff speed and lifted off the ground, a collective breath was held. This time, the plane flew smoothly, its systems humming along in harmony. Musk exhaled, watching the plane climb steadily into the sky. The engineers around him began to relax, but Musk remained tense, waiting for the next phase. The true test would come when the aircraft reached its maximum speed. That was where their previous design had faltered. That was where SkyShift had shown that their hybrid propulsion system could handle the pressure. Meanwhile, at SkyShift's headquarters, Lydia was preparing for her own test. The success of their hybrid system had already created a buzz, but now, with SpaceX pushing forward, Lydia knew they had to keep the momentum going. Their investors were watching, waiting for the next big leap. "Are we ready?" Lydia asked Tom, who had been with her every step of the way. "Everything is locked in. The commercial prototype is set to fly tomorrow morning. It's the first real-world test with passengers aboard. If this works, we'll be the company that changes the way people fly. We'll be unstoppable." Lydia nodded, but her mind kept drifting to Musk. She knew how determined he was. She knew SpaceX wasn't done yet. The fight was far from over. Back on the runway, SpaceX's plane had reached high altitude, and now, it was time to push it to its limit. Musk's hands were steady, his eyes locked onto the flight data on his screen. The speedometer surged as the aircraft hit its target velocity, a controlled speed that would test the durability of the propulsion system under pressure. Seconds felt like hours. The plane's speed was pushing the limits, its engines thrumming in the background as the systems performed flawlessly. Musk's chest tightened as he saw the numbers come through on the screen. Everything was still green. "Hold it steady," Musk muttered under his breath. He knew the next few moments would be critical. If the plane held its course, they would have won. SpaceX would have reclaimed its position as the leader in aviation innovation. And then, just as he thought they were in the clear, a warning light flashed on the control panel. Musk's breath caught in his throat. "Ryan, what's going on?" he demanded. Ryan quickly scanned the systems. The fuel efficiency system just spiked. "We need to throttle back before it overpressurizes." Musk's pulse quickened, but he didn't flinch. "Throttle back now," he commanded. Ryan keyed in the adjustments, and the plane began to stabilize. For a few agonizing seconds, no one moved. And then, slowly but surely, the aircraft systems came back into balance. The hyperflight was flying steady once more. Musk's grip on the console loosened, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he allowed himself to smile. They had done it. The test was a success. Hours later, Musk stood in front of a group of reporters, his expression serious but relieved. The test flight had been a success, and SpaceX had come back from the brink. But there was no time to savor the victory. He knew the competition wasn't just SkyShift, it was the entire world. Everyone was gunning for the future of aviation. "This is just the beginning," Musk said, his voice steady. "Today, we've proven that we can push the boundaries of what's possible. But tomorrow, we will go even further. The world will fly faster, farther, and more sustainably than ever before." As the crowd erupted into applause, Musk felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He had won this round, but he was already thinking about the next. Back at SkyShift, Lydia was pacing in her office. She had just received the news of SpaceX's success, and though it was a relief to see Musk back in the game, it didn't change the fact that SkyShift had the edge. Their commercial prototype would take to the skies the next morning with passengers on board for the first time ever. This wasn't just a technological achievement, it was the dawn of a new era in aviation. Her phone rang, and Lydia picked it up immediately. "Lydia," Tom said on the other end, his voice brimming with excitement, "the passengers are boarding. Everything is going as planned. This is it, the moment we've been working for." Lydia looked out the window of her office, watching the planes on the runway below. "It's our time," she whispered to herself. The future of air travel had arrived, and SkyShift was about to prove that they were the ones who would take the world to new heights. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?